After flour, sugar is the most important ingredient in cake baking. After all, it defines cake baking because there's no cake without sugar, except a pancake. And that's because you add the syrup afterwards. So when you're making something sweet, sugar, especially in cakes, is usually the defining thing. I grew up with very little sugar because my mother was a dentist, and so I didn't develop a super sweet tooth. And that's why my recipes use less sugar or equal sugar to flour, unlike many recipes that use more sugar than flour. I just use the minimum amount that you need so that you don't compromise texture, because sugar makes a cake tender. Without enough sugar, it would be rubbery. There are different types of sugar. Most cakes, I like to use superfine sugar, which is a white sugar that's as fine as the finest sand. And you can use it interchangeably with granulated sugar, also known as fine granulated sugar. It's 99.9% sucrose, and it's just adding sweetness, no flavor. Sugar in the raw, however, as you can see, is a coarser sugar, and it's 99% sucrose. The rest, the 1%, is molasses, but just such a small trace that it doesn't change the moisture content of the sugar, so it's equal weight. And you can pretty much use it as you would the other refined, superfine, or fine granulated, but it will give a slight flavor, and some things it's pleasant when you couple it with pineapple in a pineapple upside down cake, but mostly if I want something neutral and just sweet, I'll use the other white sugars. And then we come to brown sugar, and that's where it's a world apart. When you're making streusel or a crumb topping for a cake or a pie, if you use a really good quality light brown sugar or dark brown sugar, you will really taste the difference. I use light brown muscovado sugar more than I use the dark brown, because the dark brown has a lot more moisture and a lot more molasses, so it's so assertive, it tends to cover all the other flavors. But the light brown just gives it a wonderful butterscotchy flavor. Now you can see the difference between the muscovado sugar that comes from the island of Mauritius. It's imported by a company called India Tree, and it has all the molasses still in it. It's a volcanic island, which is always really wonderful for growing vegetables, fruits with flavor and extra taste. So that's why I think it's really worth the times that you use light brown sugar to get the top quality. The type that you see in supermarkets, the generic brand, you can see is much lighter in both the dark and the light sugar. And the other thing is that during the sugar production, all the molasses is pulled out of these types of sugar, and then it's sprayed back on. So it's not the top quality molasses necessarily, and it also only is coating the outside of the sugar. So it isn't at all the same effect and quality as the muscovado sugars. When it comes to weighing or measuring sugar, that's where, particularly with the brown sugars, I prefer weighing, because the only way to really get an accurate volume, because of the moisture content, is to pack it into the cup. And that way, it will be cup for cup heavier, because water is heavier than sugar, and you do have more water in it. Now you'll find many times with brown sugar that it gets very hard, and you can't measure or can't even break it up. And there's a very easy solution. I'm sure you all know the old trick about putting a slice of apple in with the sugar, and particularly I like to store it in a ball canning jar so that it's airtight. But I discovered recently that all you have to do is make a little cup of aluminum foil and take a kitchen towel and wet it, squeeze out all the water, and put it in the cup, screw the lid on, and after about an hour, the hardest sugar will completely soften and fall apart. So it's not that it's getting too wet, it's that it's getting too dry that makes it cake like that. In fact, if you took white sugar and put a drop of water in, as maybe you did in a sugar bowl with a spoon that was still damp, you'll see how it completely gets brick hard again. Just one drop of water will do that. But if you have the water not touching it, it will absorb the water back in evenly and become soft again. So this is basically how you'd have to press it in, whereas it would take 2 seconds to have a bowl and spoon the sugar into the bowl. And that's the story of sugar, except that if you do want to know lots more about production and different types and how it's made and all the different phases, I wrote a very detailed article on the blog, realbakingwithrose.com.